Welcome back to my channel. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. It's great to have you here. It was on a quiet evening, just as the golden light of the sun stretched across the estate, when Emma first noticed Daniel. She had passed through those familiar paths countless times, yet that evening carried a peculiar weight, as if the air itself had been waiting for the moment their eyes would meet. Emma was not searching for anything more than a little peace, walking past the row of brick buildings with their ivy, tangled walls, but when she looked up, there he was, standing by the old iron gate as though he had belonged to the place forever. There was nothing grand in his stance, nor anything practiced about the way he caught her gaze, yet something within her stirred, a spark that neither could ignore. Daniel, too, seemed caught unprepared. His thoughts had been fixed on his own concerns, the errands of the day, the hum of the estate, the weight of ordinary life. But when Emma approached, her steps light against the pavement, he found himself stilled, unable to move forward. The estate, which often felt weary and heavy with routine, seemed to fall silent, as though it had chosen to frame their meeting with an unusual kind of grace. For one fleeting moment, the world had narrowed to two strangers sharing a glance, and though neither spoke, an understanding flickered there, uncertain, fragile, yet undeniably real. Emma lowered her eyes quickly, almost embarrassed by the power of such a simple exchange. She told herself it was foolish to read so much into the glance of a man she did not know. Yet she carried the image of his expression with her as she walked, each step haunted by the quiet suggestion that something had shifted. Daniel, though he remained by the gate, felt equally unsettled. He could not name the emotion that had taken hold of him, only that the estate, with all its familiar buildings and echoing voices, suddenly seemed changed because she had passed through it. There was no conversation, no polite introduction to mark that first encounter. Still, in the silence, a promise lingered. They were two people who had lived separately within the same walls, shared the same streets without crossing paths in any meaningful way, and yet on that evening destiny seemed to have intervened. It was not love in its fullness. Love is far too complex to spring forth from a single glance, but it was the seed of something, a beginning that neither could deny. As Emma continued home, her thoughts resisted the temptation to linger on him, and yet her heart betrayed her with every beat. Daniel, watching her disappear into the distance, felt the same ache of curiosity. Neither spoke the words aloud, but each carried within them a quiet certainty that this first glance on the estate would not be their last. And from that single moment their story had already begun. The next time Emma saw Daniel, it was not by chance but by the gentle rhythm of the estate's daily life. She found him seated on the park bench that rested beneath the tall oak tree, a place she often visited when she wished to escape the noise of the world. The bench was old, its paint chipped, its wood worn smooth by years of quiet visitors. Yet on that day it became a stage for something unspoken, for the beginning of conversations that would carry more weight than either of them could have imagined. Emma sat down at the far end, not expecting more than a polite nod. Daniel glanced up, offered a smile that was neither forced nor fleeting, and returned his eyes to the book in his hands. There was comfort in the silence, though silence was never meant to last between them. He asked almost casually if she often came there to read or to think. She laughed softly and admitted it was both, though she rarely shared such personal truths with strangers. Something about his tone, however, made it easy. Their words were light at first, spoken as if testing the air, like small stones tossed into a still pond to see how far the ripples might reach. They spoke of the estate, of neighbors, of the stubborn squirrels who seemed to claim the park as their own. Yet beneath those ordinary exchanges there was a quiet music, a rhythm only they seemed to hear. Emma noticed the way his voice softened when he spoke of the city beyond the estate, of dreams not yet fulfilled, of journeys waiting to be taken. Daniel, in turn, found himself drawn to the brightness in her laughter, how it carried warmth even when she spoke of the most ordinary things. Day by day, those small encounters grew into expectation. Emma would glance toward the bench on her way home, her heart quickening if she saw him there. Daniel, too, lingered longer than he intended, waiting for her arrival, though he would never confess it aloud. Their conversations stretched with ease, slipping into stories of childhood, favorite books, hopes that seemed too fragile to share with others. Each word built a bridge between them, one so steady that neither realized how quickly they had crossed from strangers into something more tender. It was never about grand declarations. It was about the way she teased him when he stumbled over his words, or how he remembered the little details she thought she had mentioned only once. It was about the pauses between their sentences, where silence no longer felt empty but full, as though even the spaces carried meaning. In those simple conversations, Emma and Daniel discovered the rare truth that feelings do not need dramatic beginnings to be real. Love often blooms quietly in the hush of ordinary moments, until one day it is impossible to ignore. And on that park bench beneath the oak tree, what started as small talk had already begun to change the course of their lives. The evening air was soft, carrying with it the faint hum of the city that seemed to never quite sleep. Emma and Daniel found themselves walking side by side beyond the estate, where the narrow streets gave way to wider avenues lit with glowing lamps and shop windows still alive with color. The rhythm of their steps fell into harmony without effort, as though their feet had long ago decided that they belonged together. There was nothing hurried in their pace. They lingered, as if each moment stretched before them deserved to be savored. The city had a way of whispering its secrets at night, and they listened closely, though not to the noises of passing cars or distant laughter. Instead, they heard one another. Emma spoke of her dreams in a voice that carried both hope and hesitation, the kind of honesty reserved for those rare souls who feel safe enough to hear it. She admitted her longing to see more of the world, to stand at the edge of seas she had only ever traced on maps, to step into places where her name meant nothing and start again. Daniel, walking just slightly closer to her now, shared his own visions, not of adventure, but of building something steady, something that would last longer than fleeting days. He dreamed of a life rooted in both love and purpose, where even the simplest of moments could hold beauty. There was laughter between them, too, the kind that rose naturally and lingered like the glow of the streetlights overhead. He teased her for the way she grew animated when she spoke of traveling, her hands drawing shapes in the air as though she could paint her future with gestures alone. She smiled at him when he confessed that he feared failure more than he dared admit to anyone else, and in that moment she assured him with a quiet certainty that his fears did not define him. Their dreams, though different in shape, seemed to weave together as they walked, forming a tapestry of possibility that belonged to them both. The night deepened, yet neither thought of turning back. The city, alive with light, felt like a reflection of what was beginning to grow between them, bright, unpredictable, endlessly alive. At one corner, Emma paused to look at the skyline, where towers shimmered against the velvet sky, and Daniel, without thinking, looked not at the skyline but at her, realizing that his dreams were no longer separate from hers. It was in the way her eyes lit when she spoke, in the unguarded laughter that spilled freely, in the quiet pauses that did not need to be filled with words. As they finally turned toward the estate, the air cooler now and the streets quieter, there was a shared silence that spoke louder than anything they could have said. Each carried the knowledge that those glowing city nights had done more than light their path. They had drawn their hearts closer, step by step, into something neither could walk away from again. And beneath the hush of that city night, love began to feel inevitable. There came a time when the ease that once carried Emma and Daniel forward began to falter. It was not that their affection had faded, nor that the spark which first drew them together had dimmed. Rather, it was the simple truth that two hearts, however drawn to one another, can stumble when words are misunderstood or silences stretch too long. What had once been light conversation turned, for a moment, into hesitation, and with hesitation came doubt. It began with something small, as it often does. A missed meeting at the park bench, a message unanswered until too late in the evening, an expression that seemed colder than it was meant to be. Emma, sensitive to every shift, wondered if Daniel's feelings had grown uncertain. She replayed their recent talks in her mind, searching for signs, and in her searching she found shadows where perhaps there were none. Daniel, in turn, noticed her distance and grew restless, believing she no longer held him in the same regard. Neither spoke their fears outright, and so the silence between them grew heavier, filling the space that laughter and warmth had once so easily occupied. When they did meet, the ease of their earlier walks was missing. Words that once flowed freely now seemed guarded, as if each one needed to be weighed before being spoken. Emma questioned whether she had been foolish to trust so quickly in feelings that had no guarantee of lasting. Daniel asked himself whether love, as bright as it seemed at first, could survive the weight of everyday life and the doubts that pressed upon it. They cared deeply, yet the very depth of that care made them cautious, fearful of being hurt, fearful of giving too much and receiving too little in return. The estate, which had once felt like the quiet backdrop of their happiness, now seemed to mirror their unease. The park bench where they had shared so many gentle moments stood empty more often, and the city streets they had walked together felt lonelier when walked alone. It was as though the world, once alive with promise, now reflected their uncertainty back at them. Yet within those moments of doubt lay the truth of what they felt. If it did not matter, if the bond between them were nothing more than passing fancy, then neither would have felt the sting of disappointment so sharply. Their distance was not the absence of love, but the proof of its presence, love tested by fear, love that needed to be spoken and not merely assumed. It is in such trials that hearts discover what they are truly made of. For Emma and Daniel, doubt was never the end of their story. It was the turning point, the quiet storm they had to endure before understanding that even misunderstandings cannot erase what is genuine. And in that fragile space between doubt and certainty, their love waited, ready to be chosen again. The night was cool, the kind of evening where the air seemed to hush the world into stillness. Emma had chosen to walk home slowly, her thoughts wandering, when she noticed Daniel waiting by the row of streetlights that lined the path back to the estate. His presence there was unexpected, and yet it felt inevitable, as though the very lights had been lit to guide them both to that exact moment. The glow from the lamps fell softly across his face, revealing both the weight of hesitation and the determination that finally overcame it. For days he had wrestled with his silence. Doubt had kept him from speaking, fear had held him back, but the truth pressed too heavily on his chest to be hidden any longer. As Emma approached, Daniel's heart raced with a nervousness he had never known. His voice, when it came, was unsteady, yet it carried the strength of something long held in waiting. He told her how, from the first time he saw her walking across the estate, something inside him had shifted. How every small conversation, every laugh, every quiet pause had carved a space in his life that he could no longer imagine without her. Emma listened, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and wonder. He spoke not in grand flourishes or rehearsed lines, but with the raw honesty of a man who had laid aside pride to bare his heart. He admitted his faults, the misunderstandings, the hesitations that had caused her pain, but through it all he confessed that his love had remained steady and real. The streetlights above flickered faintly, their glow reflecting in her eyes as she took in each word, knowing in her heart that this was the moment she had waited for, the one she had feared might never come. There was a silence after he spoke, the kind that seemed to stretch endlessly, though only a heartbeat passed. Emma could feel the sincerity in his voice still echoing between them, and for a moment the entire world seemed to pause, holding its breath to see what she would say. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw not just the man who had made her laugh on the park bench or walked with her beneath the city lights, but the man who had chosen, despite his doubts, to lay his soul bare before her. Her reply was not dramatic, nor did it need to be. It was a smile, soft and unguarded, followed by words that carried as much weight as his own. She told him she had felt the same, though her heart too had been caught in doubt. And under the glow of those streetlights, two souls finally spoke the truth they had been carrying all along. From that night forward, nothing between them was quite the same. The confession had not just revealed love, it had secured it. And beneath those lamps their hearts found the courage to be bound together. The estate looked different to them now, though nothing outwardly had changed. The same brick buildings stood in quiet rows, the same trees stretched their branches across familiar paths, and the same children played in the courtyards with the same echoes of laughter. Yet for Emma and Daniel, everything had shifted. What had once been an ordinary place worn by the routines of daily life had become the very heart of their story, the ground on which they chose to begin again. It was here they had first exchanged glances, here they had spoken words that grew into something deeper, and here they had endured moments of doubt that tested them. Now it was here they would choose one another, not as strangers crossing paths, but as two souls bound by love. The days that followed their confession unfolded gently, carrying with them a sense of peace neither had fully known before. There was no rush, no need for dramatic promises or hurried plans. Instead, they allowed their bond to deepen in the rhythm of simple things, walking together in the mornings, sharing quiet meals in the evenings, talking of dreams not with fear, but with the certainty that those dreams could now be carried together. Even the park bench beneath the oak tree, once a place of hesitation, became a seat of joy, where they could sit side by side and laugh about the journey that had led them there. Emma often thought about how love had surprised her. She had not sought it, nor had she expected to find it in the very streets she had walked for years without notice. Daniel, too, reflected on the strange grace of it all, that what he once considered an ordinary life had been transformed simply because she was now part of it. Their love was not built on grand gestures, but on the quiet decision to choose each other every day, through the ordinary and the extraordinary alike. The estate seemed to embrace them as its own, no longer a backdrop, but a witness to what they were building. Neighbors began to notice the way their faces lit when they were together, the ease with which their voices carried in unison. Though the world outside still cold with its endless possibilities, there was something deeply right about beginning here, in the place that had first brought them together. They spoke often of the future, of where life might take them, yet always with the understanding that no matter where they went, this estate would remain the root of their story. It was here they had first felt the spark of something new. Here they had faced distance and found their way back, and here they had spoken love into the open air for the first time. Now it was here they would begin again, stronger than before, with a love tested and chosen freely. And so, in the quiet heart of the estate, they started not just a new chapter, but a new life together. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful journey through Emma and Daniel's story, from their very first glance to a love that chose to begin again. If you enjoyed walking through these moments with me, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It truly helps. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss more stories that bring English learning to life. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you're the first to know when a new story begins. Until next time, keep learning, keep dreaming, and keep believing in love.